For most of my adult life, I was just Gloria, the soap lady, not even businesswoman or entrepreneur, just the woman who played with essential oils in her kitchen while the rest of the world moved forward. My husband, Rick, used to say it with a chuckle, like he was indulging a child with a hobby. And our neighbors? They'd smile politely at my little booth at the farmer's market, then walk straight to the corporate vendors. I was 58 years old and still packaging bars of lavender oatmeal soap on my dining table, while my sister Diane ran a beauty brand worth millions. "You should stop wasting time on that kitchen stuff and come consult for us," she once told me, sipping Chardonnay by her pool. "We're launching a new organic line. Might as well slap your name on something. Real for once." That something real turned out to be a trap. It started with a family event. Diane was hosting a women in wellness mixer at her house, and she insisted I bring samples of my soap. For fun. I should have known better. Surrounded by influencers, brand reps, and glossy people in linen suits, my handmade bars, wrapped in brown paper, looked like a middle school project. But I smiled, set up my tray, and told myself to be proud. That night, Diane introduced me to her head of product development, a smug little man named Craig. "We've been thinking of a rustic touch for our next launch," he said, eyeing my soaps like they were novelty coasters. "You wouldn't mind sharing your process, would you?" I said no at first. Then Diane stepped in, assuring me it was just brainstorming, not a commitment. "You'll get credit, Gloria," she said, placing a manicured hand on my shoulder. "We're family, so I did it." I handed over my base formulas, my sourcing notes, my essential oil blends, everything I'd spent years perfecting. I even agreed to film a behind-the-scenes segment showing my process in the kitchen, just to add authenticity. They launched the line 6 weeks later. Not only did they call it handcrafted by the Bennett sisters, they didn't even mention me once. The photo shoot? They redid it with a younger model in a studio kitchen. My name? Gone. The packaging? A Glossier version of mine, down to the twine wrap and handwritten tags. The scent? Identical. The credit? All Diane's. When I confronted her, she blinked at me like I was being dramatic. "You never signed anything," she said. "And honestly, Gloria, you should be flattered. We brought your little hobby to the big leagues." I left her house that night without saying another word. But something changed in me. That was the day I stopped being the soap lady. That was the day I decided to burn their empire down, one lavender bar at a time. I didn't cry. I didn't rant online. I didn't call a lawyer. Instead, I spent the next 3 months in silence, building something I should have done years ago, a real business. No farmers markets, no Instagram giveaways. I registered Bear Grace, an LLC with zero capital, but a decade of product mastery. I learned how to brand, how to source sustainable packaging, how to scale. I applied for a small business grant and got rejected. Twice. So I sold my old engagement ring and bought my first industrial mixer. My first sale wasn't glamorous. It was an online order from a college student in Michigan. $12.95 for a lemongrass detox bar, but when she posted about it on TikTok, it went viral. Not millions of views viral, just enough for a few hundred curious orders to pour in. Every box I packed, I sealed with a sticker. Handmade, underrated, unstoppable. I worked 14-hour days out of my garage, slept 4 hours a night, and reinvested every dollar. 6 months in, I was shipping 5,000 units a week. A year in, Bear Grace had its first investor. 2 years in, I had warehouses in 3 states, a logistics team, and a waiting list of major retailers. And all this without a single ad attacking Diane's brand. I didn't need to. They were doing it to themselves. Turns out, once you cut corners to scale quickly, people notice. Diane's artisanal line began getting backlash for ingredient inconsistency and fake reviews. One of her customers had a rash and made a YouTube video that hit 4 million views. Craig, her head of product, was caught in a bribery scandal with a supplier. Sales plummeted. And then came the icing on the cake, a corporate acquisition bid. Bear Grace, my company, was now big enough to buy struggling boutique brands. Diane's was one of them. My board was hesitant. "It's too sentimental," they said. "Why buy baggage?" But I wasn't buying a company. I was buying a moment. Moment where Diane would have to sit across from me and sign over everything she once mocked. A moment where Craig would be escorted out by security while I toured the facility he once called too primitive. A moment where I'd walk through their glossy offices and see my original formula framed on the wall, this time with my name beneath it. That deal closed 3 days ago. Tonight, I'm back in my kitchen, not making soap, just thinking. The labels say Bare Grace, but every bar still carries the scent of that first betrayal, of lavender and oatmeal and quiet, revenge. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I'm launching a new line. It's called Mocked, a collection inspired by everything they said I'd never be. In the quiet of my garage-turned-lab, I discovered something I hadn't felt in years. Obsession. Not passion, not inspiration, obsession. The kind that keeps you awake at 3 a.m. adjusting ratios of shea butter to coconut oil, chasing the perfect glide texture. That summer, I didn't just make soap. I reverse-engineered the kind of legacy Diane had. Not borrowed, not gifted, but built from grit. I stopped thinking like a crafter and started thinking like a strategist. I studied brands like Lush, Dr. Bronner's, even Dove, not for what they sold, but for how they positioned their story. I noticed how they spoke to their audience, not about products, about values, clean ingredients, fair wages, sustainability. But you know what most of them forgot? Authenticity. See, Diane could hire influencers and shoot brand videos in Tuscany, but she could never recreate the raw, messy truth of a woman in her late 50s grinding through night after night in a garage lit by LED strips and grit. That story that sold. So I leaned in. I hired a scrappy Gen Z copywriter who had once stitched my TikTok with the caption, "This grandma is better than your skincare brand." Her name was Mika, and she was brilliant. She took my raw footage, me, stirring batches with a wood paddle, wiping sweat from my neck, and turned it into a manifesto, made by the woman you laughed at. For the skin you've neglected, Bare Grace. No filters, no apologies. It struck a nerve. Our Instagram went from 2,000 followers to 70,000 in 2 months. My DMs were flooded with messages from women who had once been dismissed too. Stay at home. Moms, retired nurses, laid-off teachers. They weren't buying soap. They were buying vindication in a bar. But with growth came new problems. My supply chain was fragile. I still hand-labeled every product. My hands were raw, my back ached, and I hadn't seen a proper pillow in weeks. I needed help. That's when I met him. Marcus Layton, a former COO from a mid-sized skincare startup that had been acquired by Unilever. He was charming in that sharp, no-nonsense kind of way. Suits tailored, teeth perfect, voice low and deliberate. "You're building something real," he said during our first coffee. "But you're also 2 months away from a breakdown. Let me systematize you before you collapse." I didn't trust him at first. I'd trusted too many polished faces before. But Marcus wasn't like Diane or Craig. He didn't talk over me, didn't mansplain formulas, didn't ask me to tone anything down. He walked into my chaos, mapped it out on a whiteboard, and gave it structure. Within 6 weeks, he'd helped set up a proper manufacturing unit in a small warehouse outside Atlanta. I hired 5 women over the age of 50, all looking for a second chance. Some were ex-hairdressers. One used to be a chemist. They were loyal, meticulous, and fierce. We called ourselves the Grit Lab. While Bare Grace stabilized, Diane's empire cracked. They launched a new product, a rose clay facial bar. It was, ironically, my original test formula from 5 years ago. They'd filed a provisional patent on it under a renamed version. But guess what? They botched the proportions. Customers complained of dryness. Then the rose supplier turned out to be flagged for unsafe processing practices. Within a month, lawsuits started circling. I watched it unfold without a whisper. But inside, I took notes. I watched Diane on a panel discussion try to dodge questions about her brand's quality issues. "Sometimes growth means taking risks," she said. I laughed out loud. "No, Diane. Growth means you finally faced a storm and realized you never built a shelter." One day, Craig emailed me. Yes, that Craig. The smug R&D guy who had stolen my formula. Gloria, he wrote, I've been following your journey with Bear Grace. Truly inspiring. I'd love to grab a coffee and pick your brain about your process. Pick my brain, I didn't reply. Instead, I framed his email and hung it next to the Grit Lab's first invoice from Target. Our first wholesale order, 3,000 units. That moment was sweeter than any clapback. But Diane wasn't done. She called me. After years of silence. We need to talk, she said. In person. Part of me wanted to hang up, but the other part, the new me, wanted the confrontation, so I agreed. We met at a wine bar she used to love, back when she thought I was just her quirky little sister with greasy palms. She arrived looking tired. No makeup, wrinkled blouse. I'd never seen her this human. Look, she said. I made mistakes. We took your stuff without permission. That was wrong. I said nothing. She continued. Craig's gone. Investors are circling like vultures. I need your help. We could collaborate, do a sister line for Bear Grace, play the redemption angle. Redemption angle. She still didn't. Get it. I smiled. Diane, you don't need redemption. You need an exit strategy. Her face dropped. I slid a folder across the table. An acquisition proposal. Fair market value. Generous severance for her employees. Full rights transfer. She blinked. You want to buy me out? No, I said calmly. I already did. Your board approved the sale yesterday. That was the moment it sank in. Everything she had, the glossy brand, the fake artisan persona, the corporate sheen, was now under my roof. And she? She had nothing left to leverage but pride. I left her with the check. On the way out, I looked up at the sign above the bar. It read, pressed and poured, her favorite pun. It felt ironic. Now, because she'd been both. And me, I was just getting started. The ink had barely dried on the acquisition contract when I walked through the doors of what used to be Diane's headquarters. Sleek glass walls, minimalist furniture, diffused rosewater in the air, everything designed to scream sophistication. But behind the aesthetics was a skeleton crew, rattled by layoffs and paralyzed by fear. I didn't enter like a conqueror. I entered like a woman on a mission. No fanfare, no speech. Just me in a navy blazer, comfortable shoes, and a steel resolve. Every eye turned when I stepped onto the executive floor. Most of them didn't know who I was. Some did. Warren looked away. The receptionist, a girl no older than 22, asked if I had an appointment. I own the building, I said. She blinked, cheeks flushing. Ms. Bennett, of course. Welcome. I met with the transition team in the boardroom, where I'd once been denied access during Diane's launch event, the same room where they presented my work without credit. This time I sat at the head of the table. Let's be clear, I began. We're not salvaging this brand. We're transforming it. And not for optics. For survival. They were silent. I continued. You all have a choice. Get on board or step aside. Loyalty to the past won't protect you anymore. That afternoon, I announced the rebrand. The old name, Alara Beauty, was officially retired. From now on, the company would operate as a sister branch of Bear Grace, with a new identity. Grit plus Grace. The press release went out the next morning. I wrote it myself. Grit is what they tried to scrub off. Grace is what I gave them while they mocked me. Now it's what we wear. Proudly, unapologetically. The internet devoured it. News outlets picked up the story. Homemade soap queen buys out sister's skincare brand in stunning turnaround. From garage to boardroom, Gloria Bennett redefines late-blooming power. The narrative wasn't just viral. It was magnetic. But the truth? I wasn't doing it for attention. I was doing it to rewrite the script for every woman who'd ever been called cute instead of capable. Every hobbyist dismissed as a joke. Every dreamer told she was too late. Still, not everyone welcomed the new era. Craig, despite being publicly ousted, tried to sue us for creative infringement. The irony almost made me laugh. His lawsuit was weak, fueled by ego and desperation. My lawyers dismantled it in 2 weeks. The judge threw it out with prejudice. Diane, on the other hand, vanished from the media. Some said she moved to Portugal. Others claimed she was consulting, under a different name. I didn't care. I wasn't chasing her downfall anymore. That chapter was closed. Now I had bigger battles to fight. Internal resistance, dying vendor contracts, and a lingering stink of elitism I had to cleanse from. Every department. I started with the executive team. 3 of them walked out within the first month. 1 left in protest. 1 feared for his reputation. 1 thought I'd turn the company into a soap shack. Let them go. I promoted from within, women who'd been in mid-management roles for years, overlooked because they weren't flashy, or young, or innovative enough. These were women who knew the systems, knew the customers, knew how to listen. We remodeled the offices, not for luxury, for function. No more glass cubicles separating interns from VPs. No more corner offices. With locked fridges, everyone got the same desk, including me. And then came the product relaunch. We kept 3 SKUs from Diane's old line, the only ones that didn't trigger allergic reactions, and reformulated the rest. I worked nights with our chemist Regina, who'd been with Alara for 8 years but never once allowed in creative meetings before. We're going back to basics, I told her. Ingredients that heal, scents that don't overpower, packaging that tells the truth. She nodded, and for the first time in years, she looked excited. By the end of that quarter, Grit plus Grace rolled out 6 products, all co-designed. By our internal team of over 40 women, each product named after an emotion we'd been told to suppress. There was Resolve, a charcoal clay detox bar; Stillness, a lavender chamomile bath soak; Fury, a fiery ginger citrus scrub; Worth, a calendula skin balm; and my favorite, Unseen, a clear glycerin bar with no color, no scent, just purity. Our marketing slogan? For the parts of you they tried to ignore. Sales exploded. We didn't just attract old customers, we built a movement. Influencers started hashtagging Grit and Grace Glow. Older women began posting their skincare routines proudly. Younger women shared the products with their moms. We weren't just selling, we were healing. Then, one night, I got a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a note. Gloria, you were right. I was scared. Of you. Of the truth. Of being second best. I hope you build something even I couldn't imagine. D. I stared at that D for a long time. I didn't know if I felt anger, or pity, or peace. Maybe all 3. I burned the letter, not out of hate, but to let go. The past had been documented, bought, burned, reborn. And now it was time to scale. It's time to... There's something terrifying about success when it arrives quietly. It doesn't come with champagne or standing ovations. No, it sneaks in through balance sheets. It hums in the rhythm of production floors running without crisis. It echoes in the quiet confidence of employees who finally believe they belong. And for me, it whispered at 6:47 a.m., in the steam of my first cup of black coffee, when I reviewed the numbers from last quarter. Grit plus Grace had just outperformed our 3 closest competitors we weren't supposed to. Not with our age range, not with our unapologetic branding, not with our refusal to Photoshop wrinkles off our models, but we did. The board, now filled with a mix of seasoned operators and first-time female investors, called it a miracle. Called it overdue. But success, I learned, is a shifting tide. The moment you stand still, you drown. And I had no intention of being the next cautionary tale of rapid growth gone rogue. So I did something most founders fear. I stepped back. Not out of the company, never, but out of the day-to-day grind. I appointed Regina, our chemist, as head of product innovation. I promoted Alyssa, a 45-year-old former retail manager who'd once been told she was too nice for leadership, to chief operating officer. And I hired a young CFO named Ryan, who looked like he walked off a fintech startup poster. Smart, fast, respectful. He called me ma'am once, and I nearly fired him on the spot. We settled on Gloria. With the right team in place, I turned to the next frontier, international expansion. Europe was easy. They already loved anything artisanal. But the real test was Asia, especially South Korea and Japan, where beauty standards were brutal, and ageism disguised itself as modernity. Our strategy? Honesty. We didn't try to fit in. We leaned out. We launched a Tokyo campaign featuring 3 women, a 62-year-old poet, a 55-year-old tattoo artist, and a retired banker turned ceramicist. No contouring, no soft filters, just skin, light, and resilience. The tagline? Time left. It's Mark. So did we. It broke every rule of J-beauty marketing. And it worked. Sales doubled in 6 weeks. Korean influencers started unboxing our products not for glam, but for the message. One even cried on camera, holding the Resolve bar in her hand, whispering, "This feels like my mother." Meanwhile, stateside, something unexpected happened. Diane's old fan base, the ones who worshipped her curated perfection, started sliding into our ecosystem. Not because they were loyal, but because they were tired. Tired of unattainable ideals. Tired of being marketed to like flaws were enemies. Tired of watching women be replaced every 5 years because the market demands freshness. They didn't want fresh anymore, they wanted real. But with growth came new shadows. I started receiving messages, anonymous tips, whispers from within the industry. Big brands were watching us. Not admiring, targeting, one conglomerate, I won't name names, began undercutting our prices with knockoff formulas. They even hired a private firm to investigate our supply chain, hoping to uncover something scandalous. The first time I heard about it, I laughed. The second time, I prepared. I called Marcus. "It's starting," I told him. He was quiet for a beat. "You're becoming a threat. Congratulations." We reviewed every contract, every vendor, every employee agreement. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew how this game was played. I'd once been the woman they didn't see. Now I was the woman they wished they hadn't provoked. Then came the interview request. Forbes. Not the digital blog. The cover. Story. From soapmaker to CEO, how Gloria Bennett built an empire in her 50s. I nearly declined. Fame wasn't the goal. But then I remembered how many women never got to see someone like them on that kind of pedestal. So I said yes. They sent a young reporter named Kayla. She wore boots that cost more than my first mixer. I expected condescension. Instead, she sat across from me, eyes wide, voice steady, and asked, "What made you not give up?" I stared at her. "I did give up," I said. "I gave up on waiting for permission. And the minute I did, everything changed." She asked about Diane. I answered with silence. She asked about revenge. I answered with results. When the piece ran, it went viral within hours, not because of the numbers, but because of the photo. Just me, standing in the grit lab, sleeves rolled, no makeup, smile crooked, hands stained with clay and lye. I wasn't pretty in that photo. I was undeniable. A week later, my inbox exploded. Harvard wanted me to speak. Stanford offered an honorary doctorate. A documentary pitch arrived from Netflix. And in the middle of it all, I got an email from an address I hadn't seen in years. rick.bennett@whiteemail.com, subject. "Proud of you." I stared at the screen, my ex-husband. The man who'd called my soap a cute distraction. The man who'd once joked at a dinner party, "Gloria's a wizard with lavender, but don't ask her about profit margins." The man who walked out 20 years ago when he got bored. Deleted the email, without opening it. There are some doors you don't close. You seal them in concrete, because the future doesn't have room for ghosts, and mine, it was just beginning to blaze. There's a strange thing that happens when people finally see you. At first, they celebrate. Then, they scrutinize. And if you're a woman past 50, especially one who didn't climb the right ladder, they start searching for cracks to pull you down. I didn't need to check Twitter to know the vultures were circling. They came quietly, with smiles at galas and congratulations at expos. But I recognized the scent of threat. It wasn't fear that guided them. It was discomfort. I was a reminder that their system, built on youth, pedigree, and polished PR, wasn't as bulletproof as they thought, because I had broken through. And worse, I had done it without them. One investor called me a wildcard asset. Another said, "You're disrupting an industry that doesn't like disruption from outsiders." They meant, "You're not one of us." So I leaned in harder. I launched the Unfiltered Initiative, a sub-brand within Grit Plus Grace, co-created with women over 50, including cancer survivors, single mothers, retired service women, and yes, ex-housewives. Like me. Each woman had a product line named after her story. Marlene, a 63-year-old former therapist, helped create a calming oil for post-menopausal skin. Tony, a 57-year-old auto mechanic, inspired a hand repair balm that became our bestseller. We didn't hire models. We used real people, real lives, real scars. The industry panicked. Our competitors scrambled to create their own authentic campaigns, but theirs reeked of artificial empathy, perfectly lit, corporate safe. Ours were raw, filmed in kitchens and workshops and backyards. Where life actually happened, sales surged. Again. But so did the pressure. A major acquisition offer came from a legacy beauty conglomerate, the kind that had once turned Diane into a star. They offered a 9-figure deal, enough to retire 3 generations. My board was split. It's the dream, Ryan whispered. This is generational wealth. But I wasn't in this for the dream. I was in it for the rewrite, and selling to them would mean letting them bury the story under layers of polish. So I said no, and that was when the gloves came off. An anonymous expose landed in a beauty trade journal, questioning the purity of our ingredients. They cited unnamed sources, claimed our suppliers were unverified, accused me of cultivating a revenge-driven leadership culture. It was subtle sabotage, nothing that could stick, but enough to cast doubt. The old me would have curled up, apologized, tried to explain. The new me? I invited the reporter to tour our lab, cameras welcome. I published our full supply chain with third-party verification. I held a press conference with every woman on our product team standing behind me. And then I looked straight into the camera. My name is Gloria Bennett. I was invisible for 30 years. Now every move I make is questioned, dissected, or discredited. Not because it's wrong, but because I'm not supposed to be here. But here's the thing. I'm not going anywhere. So if you're uncomfortable, blink. The video went viral. Again. But this time it wasn't just our customers who rallied. Other founders, especially women, reached out. CEOs, chefs, engineers, architects in their 50s and 60s. They said the same thing. Thank you for not softening. I didn't soften. I scaled. I launched a mentorship program, not for college grads, but for women re-entering the workforce after decades. We called it Second Fire. No corporate jargon. Just real training, funding, and visibility. One of our mentees, Sharon, 61, pitched a shampoo bar that sold out in 18 hours. Another, Elsie, created a lip salve now carried in Whole Foods. We weren't just rebuilding lives, we were redefining timelines. But amidst the momentum, something shifted in me. I began to wonder, had I become the empire I once despised? Was I listening less? Delegating empathy in the name of efficiency? So I did what I hadn't done in months. I went back to the garage, the original one, where it started. The shelves were dusty, the mixer rusted. A forgotten batch of lemongrass soap still sat on the back rack, wrapped in paper I'd handwritten with a Sharpie. I picked it up, cracked a small corner, and inhaled. The scent hit me like a memory. Quiet, resilient, homemade hope. I sat on the cold concrete floor and just was for a moment, and I realized something. The revenge wasn't in the empire. It wasn't in the Forbes article, the declined offers, or even the bought-out brand. The real revenge, I had turned what they dismissed into something they could never replicate. Not the formula, not the growth, not even the story, but the unbreakable truth that I was never small, just underestimated. I stood up, pocketed the bar, and walked out. A week later, I announced the newest phase of Grit Plus Grace. No new products, no flashy campaigns, just this. Message printed on every package. Still here, still rising, still ours. I used to think legacy was something you left behind. A name etched on a building, a scholarship fund, a framed magazine cover. But now I know the truth. Legacy isn't what you leave. It's what you live through. And mine was layered. like the bars of soap I once poured in silence, imperfect, but solid to the core. 2 years after the takeover, Grit plus Grace became more than a company. It became a force. We weren't just on shelves. We were in conversations, in classrooms, in board meetings. Our products sat beside billion-dollar brands, not because we mimicked them, but because we stood defiantly apart. But with visibility came a new challenge: succession. I was 60. And though my mind was sharper than ever, my body whispered reminders that I couldn't sprint forever. My doctor suggested rest. My team begged me to delegate more. Even Marcus, ever the stoic planner, brought up executive transition structures over dinner. I resisted. At first, because letting go, even a little, felt like betrayal. This company had been my second skin, my redemption, my rebellion. Who would protect it like I did? But I knew better. Empires don't fall from the outside. They collapse from leaders who hold too tight. So I began planning. I created a succession circle. Not just one CEO in training, but 5 women, all from different departments, backgrounds, and age groups. We called it the 5th layer, a nod to the 5 layers of my original lavender oatmeal bar. Each woman was given a 6-month rotating CEO seat. They'd co-lead with me, shadow decisions, challenge policies, and present new strategies. It wasn't about choosing the strongest. It was about building a bench so strong the company could thrive without any one name. Meanwhile, I focused on expansion, not of profits, of impact. We launched Grit Voices, a podcast platform that gave women over 50 a stage to share their stories. Not just the triumphs, but the losses, the boring middle chapters, the regrets they turned into revolutions. It wasn't sleek. It was raw. And it exploded. Spotify featured us for Women's History Month. Oprah's team sent a handwritten note. Michelle Obama followed our account. But the highlight, an email from a 71-year-old woman named Clara. She wrote, "I buried my husband. My kids moved away. I had no job, no plan, no clue who I was anymore. Then I found your Resolve bar at a store in Des Moines. The scent reminded me of who I used to be and made me believe there was more. Today, I started my own Etsy shop. Thank you for making me feel visible again." I read it 3 times. Then I cried. Not from sadness, from confirmation. This was the point, not revenge, not riches, resonance. Still, part of me remained haunted by a ghost I hadn't faced. Diane. I hadn't spoken to her since the acquisition. We didn't exchange holiday cards, didn't cross paths at events. She'd disappeared and I let her. Until one morning, a letter arrived. Not email, not a lawyer's note, an envelope, handwritten, elegant, cursive. "Gloria, I've been watching from afar. Not out of jealousy anymore, but awe. You did what I couldn't. You led with truth. With scars, with the kind of strength I faked for decades. I hated you for being real, because it reminded me of how hollow I'd become. I'm in recovery now. Not from illness, from ego. I live on a farm in Oregon. I make candles. Isn't that funny? All these years mocking your craft, now I find peace in wax and wick. I don't want anything from you, just forgiveness. And maybe, someday, your friendship, love." I read it in my office, alone, at dusk, the sun bleeding gold across the hardwood floor. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, breathing. And after a long while, I took out a sheet of paper. Wrote one sentence. "When you're ready, send me a candle." I mailed it the next morning. 2 weeks later, a small package arrived. Inside, a white beeswax candle with a note. Scent, humility, burn time, as long as it takes. I lit it that night. Let it burn while I stood by the window watching the skyline. The city I'd once feared, the world that had laughed, now humming beneath my feet. And in that glow I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore, because revenge had done its job. It had awakened me, carried me, elevated me. But it wasn't who I was anymore. I was more a maker, a mentor, a mother, to 1,000 second chances. And as the flame flickered low, I whispered into the dark, "Let's see what Chapter 7 brings." The morning of our 5-year anniversary, I woke up before sunrise. Not from stress, but instinct. My body had lived on adrenaline for so long, it didn't quite know how to rest. But today felt different. Lighter. Like the chapter was about to turn itself. I walked into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked into the mirror. The woman staring back at me had wrinkles, soft jowls, faint sunspots, eyes less sharp, more tired, but she also had something new: peace. I didn't see a fighter anymore. I saw a founder, a finisher, a woman who had nothing left to prove, only things left to give. By 8 a.m., I was standing backstage at the Grit Plus Grace annual summit. The venue was packed, over 2,000 attendees, mostly women, all ages. They wore t-shirts with slogans from our campaigns. Some carried signs that read, "Second Fire Saved Me." Others just held their heads high, and I could tell that was more than enough. Marcus adjusted my mic. Nervous? I smiled. I used to be. Now I'm just ready. He nodded. Whatever you say today, they'll remember. I stepped into the spotlight, applause roared like a wave. I let it wash over me, not because I needed the validation, but because I knew what it meant. It wasn't for me. It was for what I represented. I raised the mic and began. 5 years ago, I was packaging soap on a folding table in a garage, alone, overlooked, called cute more times than I care to count. I had no capital, no connections, no roadmap, just a stubborn heart and a head full of scent formulas. Laughter. I was told I was too late, too old, too kitchen sink. More laughter. And now? Grit Plus. Grace ships to 42 countries. Our podcast reaches millions. Our mentorship program has funded over 180 female-led startups, the oldest founder being 73. Cheers erupted. But I'm not here today to talk about success. I'm here to talk about what comes after revenge. Because yes, I built this company with fire, with fury, with every no and every door slammed in my face. I paused. But fire alone doesn't sustain you. It consumes. And if you're not careful, it burns down the very things you built to rise. Silence. So I let the fire cool. And from its ashes, I built legacy. Not for headlines, but for you. For the women who were told it was over. For the ones who made homemade into powerful, who made late into legendary. I took a deep breath. And so today, I want to say something I never thought I'd say. I'm stepping down. Gasps. Not away. Just down. From CEO to chairwoman. Because it's time for new hands to shape this clay. Hands that carry the same grit, the same grace, but with their own rhythm. Behind me, the stage lights shifted. Alyssa, Regina, Mika, and 2 other women stepped out. The full 5th layer team. They waved. The audience gave a standing ovation that felt like thunder. Tears welled in my eyes. But I held steady. This company isn't mine anymore, I said. It's ours. And if you ever doubt your worth because of your age, your past, your pace, remember me. Not the Forbes cover. Not the founder's title. Just the woman who once stirred lavender soap with a wooden spoon and dared to believe that was enough. I closed with the words etched on every Grit Plus Grace bar. Handmade, underrated, unstoppable. The lights dimmed. The music swelled, and just like that, my story, this chapter of it, ended. 3 months later, I bought a small plot of land in Northern California. Built a modest cabin, no Wi-Fi, no board meetings, just birds, books, and a shed where I made soap again, not to sell, but to soothe. One afternoon, I got a knock at the door. It was Diane. She held a basket of candles and a bottle of wine. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside and let her in. We didn't talk about the past. Didn't need to. We sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the trees, and for the first time in decades, it was easy. She turned to me and said, "You know, I never hated your soap. I just hated how pure it made me feel. Like I had to face myself." I smiled. That's what soap's supposed to do. We laughed. We cried. We forgave. That night, I wrote a letter to myself. Dear Gloria, you did good. Not perfect. Not always graceful. but good. You prove that the world doesn't get to decide your expiration date, that beginnings don't care about age, and that sometimes revenge is just the beginning of something much softer, much stronger, and far more lasting. Love, the woman in the mirror.